And great, we are live. Welcome to our friends on Facebook and YouTube, and of course Instagram. Thanks for sticking with us. Friends, we've got a big topic tonight. The discussion we're looking at this evening is anti-Semitism, why it exists, and what we can do about it. Now, I guess it's a little ambitious for me to sit here and try to summarize reasons and causes of anti-Semitism, which has been around for at least 3,333 years, in about 30 minutes. However, that's the task which I've been given, or actually gave myself. So we're going to go through some of the reasons, the causes, and as I want to show you right now, probably the excuses that people have when it comes to dealing with anti-Semitism, why this hatred has been around for so long. Now, it's sometimes called the world's oldest hate. There was hatred before the Jewish people appeared on the scene as a nation. But anti-Semitism is different. And it's different for a few reasons. Number one, it is really, really old. It's been around for a long time, and it just never went away. It's also extremely intense. In other words, when people don't like a group, an ethnic group, a racial group, they'll make jokes about them, and they may not employ them. But we've been dealing with exiles, pogroms, holocausts. So it's really old and it's really intense. Unlike any other nation or race, which we're not, as we're going to see this evening, throughout world history. And also we're going to see the universality of it. It's just all over the place. It's not limited to one country or one region. Wherever Jews are, there's anti-Semitism, even in places where there are no Jews and haven't been Jews for hundreds of years. It may sound weird. Anti-Semitism and stereotypes and blood libels are still there. We're going to talk about British, or I should say more maybe English anti-Semitism in the days that Shakespeare wrote, The Merchant of Venice, we're going to see. Shylock, which was written, I think, in the 1600s, also the early 1600s. Shylock was this terrible moneylender character, and people watch that or read Shakespeare and think, well, there must have been a lot of bad Jews around Britain when Shakespeare wrote. But the truth was, there were no Jews in Britain for hundreds of years before Shakespeare was even born. And it wasn't until Oliver Cromwell, we're going to see, let them back in. So we're going to see that anti-Semitism, although we like to include it among other forms of hatred and racism, it's really different from everything else that any other nation or people have experienced. Now, we're going to try to find some reasons or causes, but truth be told, even if we do find reasons or causes that we're not going to really find, as I'll explain in a moment, that doesn't mean you're going to find a cure. Having a reason for something or the cause behind it doesn't get rid of it. Just like a person could be diagnosed with a terrible disease. You can know where the disease came from. You can know how you got it. You can know everything about it. It's full pathology, and yet it's not going to get rid of it. And that's really going to be the ending to our story this evening. However, I'm still going to share with you a few ideas, hopefully, that will relieve some of the challenges that come with it. Okay, we're going to look at 6 common reasons or causes for anti-Semitism. Now, I don't like the word reasons or causes because, as I'm going to show you with each one of these 6, they don't really work. There's exceptions to all of them, and there's other examples which the same reason or cause may apply, and yet anti-Semitism or racism doesn't apply over there. So when I'm going to talk about 6 reasons or causes, as I'm going to call them for the rest of tonight's presentation, really they're excuses. These are 6 excuses for Jew hatred. Let's just say what it is and be very clear. The first we're going to look at is economic. Jews are hated because they possess too much wealth and too much power. And unless you've been living under a rock, and unless that rock isn't here in New York where I am, or Britain or Israel, even if that rock is in Kabul, you may have realized that anti-Semitism is definitely on the rise, and not a slow rise, a very steep rise over the past year and a half. We've all seen the videos, we've all heard the stories of this hatred, and people are perplexed, and I receive a lot of emails and calls. Actually, that's what precipitated this topic this evening, for saying, why, Rabbi, why is this happening to us? And this idea of the economic wealth and power, just go to YouTube. Actually, you don't have to. Just trust me. Any interview with anyone on the street today, with many people, I should say, and they usually kind of throw that out. That's going to be number one. Number two is the chosen people idea. Jews are hated because they arrogantly claim they are the chosen people. We're going to talk about that. Excuse. It's not a cause or a reason. It's an excuse for hatred. We're going to talk about the scapegoat idea, that Jews are a convenient group to single out. But we're going to see that there are many other convenient groups that are not scapegoated. And when they are, it's not as intense and hateful and genocidal as it is against our people. That's not to say there aren't other genocides or hatreds out there. I'm not claiming that at all. So please do not take my words out of context. However, Jew hatred, older and much more intense and universal than any other hatred. That I am sticking by. Deicide, we'll talk about that. The fact that Jews are hated because they killed Jesus. Outsiders. The fact that the Jewish people are considered to be outsiders. They're different. They're unlike everyone else. We'll see also that may be a common reason given or a cause, but it's really an excuse. And finally, the racial theory, which will be the easiest one to dismiss, because we are an inferior race, which kind of contradicts the economic one, because either we are full of power and full of wealth, or we are inferior and we're like the rats in the sewers. And if you actually look at even modern history, right, Nazi depictions of Jews, either we are fully powerful, controlling the globe with our tentacles wrapped around it, or we're just a bunch of dirty Jews. Well, pick one. You can't have both. Either we're one or we are the other. Okay, so that's going to be our journey this evening. Let's start with this economic theory of anti-Semitism. And we really saw this, those people have heard of the book, this fictitious account of the minutes that were written down in secret meetings of Jewish leaders conspiring world domination. And you may have heard of it as the anti-Semitic book, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This book has been proven countless times to be an absolute fake. It was probably written by the Russian secret police. It was handed out. It's been translated. It's still being peddled throughout the world, especially in the Middle East. And many people still believe this. I have people, as you know, I'm very much on social media. That's probably why you're watching this today. I have people writing to me all over the world. And many of them made comments and sometimes even threats against me and the Jewish people. I seem to be a lightning rod for a lot of this. That we Jews have this kind of cabal that we know. One guy many years ago even made such a statement like, oh, I heard that when you guys reach bar mitzvah, you're given a lot of money and you're set up in business to become millionaires. Well, I never got the memo because all the gifts and all the money I got was spent, and there wasn't any secret society that handed out money to the Jewish people to start up businesses. If there was, or if there were, I promise you I would have reached out to get my cash. There is no such society. It's all complete and utter nonsense, as anyone who's Jewish does know that. And this idea that this universal attitude towards the rich, that suddenly we're hated because we have resources wherever we go, right? We don't see any sustained historical persecution against wealthy non-Jews. I mean, you must realize there are plenty of wealthy non-Jews who may be hated by small amounts of people, but they're not exiled en masse. They're not tortured. They're not pogromed against. They're not Holocaust perpetrated against either. So this idea that we have lots of money and influence and power doesn't seem to apply to many other groups that do have lots of money and power throughout the ages. So it's an excuse. It's not a reason or a cause, because it's just not true. Secondly, if you remove wealth and power for the Jewish people, according to this theory that it's the money that we have and the power that we have that makes people hate us, well, if you remove the money, remove the power, there should be no more anti-Semitism. And yet, it's still there. There have been many times. Go to the shtetls in Poland and Russia. Go to the Jews who lived in Persia, in Iraq, who were lower class, if not middle class people, who were barely making a living, working very, very hard, who had higher taxes put against them. And yet, even with that, the fact that during the 17th to the 20th centuries, we really didn't have much power. Okay, there were individuals like the Rothschilds that everyone likes to mention. There was one family who was very, very wealthy, and that's the reason for all that. We know that's complete nonsense, because most Jews did not have money, so they definitely weren't siphoning off that cash. And yet, the pogroms and the torture, right from the Middle Ages, you can't stop seeing the countless pogroms against Jewish people, even though these people didn't investigate bank accounts or investment portfolios, because we never had them. So that reason melts away very, very quickly. Once again, we see that there were times when Jewish people did work in the money business, and that's because, for example, in the Middle Ages, we know that we were restricted from many jobs and many industries, and one of the few industries that everyone realizes was moneylenders. I mean, it started off this talk, those who are with us, talking about the image of Shylock, this terrible, money-grabbing, money-lender Jew who wants his pound of flesh. If you remember, a character of Shakespeare in The Merchant of Venice that, if I remember correctly, I studied it in high school, because I come from Britain, you have to. And I think that was written in 1600 or so. But we know that can't be accurate because, my friends, you should know that it was King Edward I, I believe, who in 1290 expelled all the Jews from Britain. There were no Jews in Britain when Shakespeare was born, when he lived, and definitely when he wrote Merchant of Venice and gave that depiction of the Jewish money lender. It wasn't until 1650 something, I think 1657, when Oliver Cromwell allowed the Jews to return, because he actually had a great aspiration to bring the Messiah back. He was a believer of messianic destiny and wanted the Jews to return. So that's actually when the Jews came back. But this image of the money lender being the, I mean, this really was a terrible, terrible job to have. You lended money, and when you lent it, if the person couldn't afford to give it back to you, you may complain, but then they'd kill you. I mean, that's precisely what the royalty did in Britain. When they kicked all these Jews out, they actually transferred all the money owed to Jews, because remember, that was the only one of the few industries that Jews could work in, and said, well, it now all belongs to the royalty. So, I mean, it didn't really work, and the Jewish power and money didn't really help us then, did it? I mean, we never even have it in those days anyway. So this idea of the powerful Jews or weak Jews, rich Jews or poor Jews, they've all been hated equally. We're not buying it. Okay, so this economic thing we've kind of like pushed to the side as one of the reasons or causes, because it's just an excuse. Let's talk about the chosen people theory, because I get asked about this a lot. What's this idea of a chosen people? Now, there is a concept in Jewish thought. We see it in the prophets and the Nevi'im. The idea of the HaNivchar, the chosen people. Let me define exactly what that means for you right now. Because if you hear it, see it online, you can respond with the following words. Yep, we are chosen, and God chose us to keep the Torah and do mitzvot and be an example, a light unto the nations that we're going to talk about again. That's going to be very, very important for the conclusion of our discussion today. This chosen people theory. People misinterpret it, not as a reason, but as an excuse status. Oh, you Jews think you're better than everyone else. Well, there was actually the University of California a number of years ago did a study on anti-Semitism. I mean, studies on anti-Semitism. People love studying anti-Semitism. Like if they find a reason for it, it's going to go away. It's not. As I'm going to prove to you, it's always going to be there because they're just going to find another excuse to hate us. Non-Jewish Americans were presented with 18 unfavorable statements about Jews and asked whether they believed any of them. By far the most widely held belief among those surveyed, 59%, was that Jews consider themselves to be God's chosen people. Once again, just because you're chosen doesn't mean you get any better treatment. It means you're chosen for a mission, a cause, a role. You can have a class of students and you choose one and say you're the chosen one, and they feel so good and they feel so special. And I'm like, right, no, go clean my car, and you're going to have double as much homework as anyone else, and you're going to have to take care of these 6 students and give them a whole list of things like, hey, what's the whole chosen thing about? Aren't I going to be sitting back doing nothing? That's not what we're chosen for. The Jewish people were chosen as the Am HaNivchar, as the light unto the nations, to be a spiritual model based upon doing the Torah, performing the mitzvot, learning Torah, and having a moral and ethical code that should hopefully be taught to the entire world. That's it, my friends. That's the entire thing. It's not too exciting, but it's really, really important. And so this idea that we are the chosen people and therefore you should hate us. Well, first of all, I should point out there are many other nations out there who believe they're the chosen people in one way or another, and yet are not hated as much as the Jewish people. I mean, the Chinese chose the name for their country China because the word means center of the universe. Japan means source of the sun. I think the Native Americans, the same word for Native American, how they describe themselves is human being, how everyone else is not. And yet, although they've all had to deal with their own persecutions, nowhere near as much and intense as the Jewish people. So that can't be the reason. It can't be a cause. Once again, it's an excuse for Jew hatred. The scapegoat theory. Now, this one comes in very, very handy and kind of makes sense, right? You're in a country, the economy is doing terribly, you have extremely high inflation, you want to gain the trust of the masses, you are the dictator, and so people approach you and you say, well, the reason this is happening is not because of me, not because of my government, it's this small group, this little group that's making this all happen. If we get rid of them, we will get rid of every problem and challenge that we have. So, I mean, that's been done before. Hitler was very effective in blaming the Jews for everything. I mean, ironically, the concept of a scapegoat actually comes from the Torah. It's part of the Yom Kippur service. There was a goat where the sins were placed upon, and then it was killed as part of the Yom Kippur service. That's the scapegoat. It's the excuse. We're putting all of our problems on once we get rid of that thing. Well, when it comes to this, it kind of makes sense to say, well, that'll be a reason, yeah? However, ascribing and diverting all blame to problems upon an innocent victim kind of makes sense as a reason or a cause, but then again, maybe it doesn't. Maybe the scapegoat is chosen because they were hated already. In other words, you don't see Hitler standing up on a balcony saying, I have found a group among us, they are the scourge of humanity, They are dominating the German people. They're destroying our motherland. Bicycle riders. They're the ones that are doing it. I mean, let's say Hitler would have said that. People would have been like, what? We all ride bicycles. Why are you picking on them? How did the bicycle riders end up? People would not have bought that. Why not? Because there wasn't an existing hatred. The fact that the Jews were scapegoated in the first place must mean that there was a hatred that pre-existed in order for the scapegoating to work. So even that reason or that cause isn't enough to explain this absolute hatred that exists today. And people do try it. Make no mistake. I'm not saying these things don't exist. People are still using economic, right? Rothschild, money, grabbing power, hungry people all controlling the world. You hear it all the time. You hear it from world's leaders. Not just like the few white supremacists or jihadi Muslims that want to kill us. Right? We're seeing this right through. And this idea of the chosen people, right? All these things are still used as excuses, but that's what they are. They are excuses. They're not reasons or causes. Let's look at the next one. Deicide. The idea that the Jewish people are hated because they killed Jesus. Well, I know that may seem like a reason or a cause, and I know the Crusades definitely were part of that. There were many pogroms throughout Europe. But you should realize that even that can't be the reason and the cause for Jew hatred for a few reasons. Firstly, because Christian anti-Semitism didn't begin until long after the death of Jesus, right? It wasn't until several centuries later that the church fathers decided the Jews as a group should be persecuted because they killed Jesus. So that's not holding water. That cannot be the reason or the cause, okay? I mean, real Jew hatred didn't come around because of Christianity until the Crusades, and that was 1,000 years after the death of Jesus. So that really can't be seen as a reason. And by the way, in its day, it didn't lead to anti-Semitism for the main reason that, well, who actually did kill Jesus? Well, if you look at the New Testament, a number of times you see Matthew, John, and Mark say very clearly it was the Romans. Maybe there was a Jew supposedly who gave, but it was still, and notice that the Christians aren't angry with the Romans today. I mean, the center of Christendom, of Christological thinking, life, and everything is in Rome. So why are they not angry with the Romans today? Obviously, it can't be that. That cannot be the reason. That can't be the cause, because, hey, Christianity and the fact that we supposedly killed Jesus, who was actually a Jew and one of our own, until he was chosen hundreds of years later to become the Lord and Savior of Christendom, doesn't make sense, because it didn't really begin till hundreds, if not 1,000 of years later. So we can get rid of that as well. So economic cause reason are here, but it's an excuse. Chosen people, again, it's an excuse because there's many other chosen people throughout history. Scapegoat, well, why them? I mean, you can scapegoat anyone. The fact you scapegoat us means that we were chosen because we were already hated, and there was already an image that pre-existed Hitler and the Third Reich that actually made us the scapegoat. Their side, we've already proven, this idea did not come up till a long time after Jesus' death, and there was a long period where anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews did exist without this idea as well. Well, let's maybe look at a reason or possible cause, the fact that we are outsiders, as sociologists call it, the dislike of the unlike. They dislike those people who are unlike them. And, I mean, even that can't be a real reason or a cause of it, because there's been many outsiders who may be hated and made fun of and jokes are made about them, and maybe they get an occasional beating here or there. But in the end, it's not enough to account for it. And even if it is because we are outsiders and unlike them, well, according to that, if that really is the reason and really is the cause for anti-Semitism, well, when we get rid of our outsideness and unlike themness, and we totally assimilate into any given society, that should be the end of it, right? Well, no. We know the outsider theory isn't really working, because even when Jews assimilate, like they have done for hundreds of years, they still hate us and they still want to kill us. So that's not going to work either. I mean, there were a lot, my friends, of assimilated Jews in Germany who had given up on a lot of stuff, right? They even gave up on Israel. The entire Reform movement of its day in Germany, that was a big movement. That was actually the birth of Reform Judaism. They replaced Jerusalem with Berlin in their prayer books and their liturgy and their hymns. And that didn't work, and we know what happened over there. I mean, they were sorely disappointed. The Dreyfus Affair, which everyone knows about, Alfred Dreyfus, who was these were falsified charges against this Jewish officer in the French army. And this was contrived to show that Jews could never be loyal citizens of their host countries. And as far as I know, he was a pretty assimilated Jew, and yet that didn't help. I mean, Hitler turned around to a lot of people who said, no, we're not Jewish. My great-grandfather was Jewish on one side, and it's like, yeah, he's still a Jew. Like, what are you talking about? I fought in the First World War for Germany. He's like, yeah, I don't care. He's still a Jew, and they still got it. So this idea of the outsider being the reason doesn't hold weight, because when we're insiders and we even give up all of the outside and inside visions of being Jewish, we are still hated. So that can't be a reason. It's still an excuse. So what are we left with? I've overrun my time. Be another few minutes. Well, the racial theory, well, not too much to say on this, because anyone who's got eyes in their head at this point of world history realizes that the Jewish people are not a race. We are a nation. And I know Hitler tried to give us certain racial qualities in order to be hated, but we've all seen black Jews, we've all seen white Jews, and Jews from all over the world of every shade and color, every ethnicity, whether they come from Ethiopia or China and Kaifeng, or wherever. And yet, they still hate us, although there isn't a unified racial feature that we all have. I mean, even the big nose thing doesn't hold weight, even though I do have a rather larger nose. But there may be my family that don't, and you'll know people who don't as well. So it's not going to work. I mean, you've all hopefully read or seen this idea, right, of the young child pulled in front of the class in Germany in the 1930s saying, now this is the perfect German racial specimen, and yet this kid happened to be Jewish. It doesn't work. This racial thing has been given as a reason or a cause, but once again, obviously, it's a excuse. And so you may be thinking, well, all of these things that we've spoken about, the economic power influence, the chosen people, the scapegoat idea, the outsider, the deicide, all these things have at one point in time applied to many, many people in many nations. But there are a number of reasons, which I've mentioned already, but I'm going to mention again, why they're different for the Jews. Jew hatred is not just another form of racism. It's categorically different. It's the longevity of it. It's been around for so long, it doesn't go away. Usually a hatred comes up for a small group of people in the population, but then within a few years, 1-2 generations, it just goes away. And yet Jew hatred has been around for so long. Then there's the universality of it, the fact that Jewish people is And anti-Semitism is found worldwide, even in places where there are no Jews. It happens to be that Japan, although it hasn't housed many Jews, has many, I think the idea of Mein Kampf is sold extremely well over there for some reason. I mean, between the years of 250 of the Common Era and 1948, a period of 1700 years or so, Jews in Europe experienced an average of one expulsion every 21 years. It's just so much, right? Jews have been expelled from England, we said, France, Austria, Germany, Lithuania, Spain, Portugal, as you all know, Bohemia, Moravia, and 71 other countries that I found. That's a lot of Jews being hated throughout the world. And it's the intensity of it, right? A group that is hated usually becomes the butt of ethnic jokes, which is not okay. But you can't compare that to a Holocaust. It's just not the same. And then there's this confusion about anti-Semitism that you can't find one reason. There are so many reasons given, and so many seminars that I've been to, and so many conferences on anti-Semitism, and there isn't one reason. If it was Jewish, one reason should suffice. But once again, they choose so many reasons, and they're so contradictory. Right? Either we're extremely powerful and controlling the media and the press and the Wall Street and all the money, or we're this dirty Jew. I had a friend of mine who was actually walking to synagogue once and was off on his way to synagogue, and he was clean, he told me, with his beautiful shiny shoes and his suit, right, and his clean yarmulke, showered, shaved. He's walking to synagogue, and a truck pulls up next to him, and someone pulls down the window and says, "You dirty Jew." And he said the guy stank. He was covered in filth, right? There were flies who were like roaming around his head. And the guy's thinking to himself, "I'm the dirty one. Look at yourself, buddy. It's not me." So there's a lot of confusion and contradictory evidence as to what's really leading to this. I mean, basically what I'm saying is too many reasons for Jew hatred means there's no reason at all. No rational reason for Jew hatred at all. Plenty of excuses, but no real reasons. Well, I could stop over there. However, there is a traditional view in Judaism of anti-Semitism, and it goes right back 3,333 years, if not before. And what's that? It goes back to Har Sinai, says the Talmud. We know the Jewish people as a nation began 49 days after leaving Egypt. Before then we were Hebrews, but it wasn't until we reached Mount Sinai, we received the Torah, that we were considered to be the Jewish people. And the rabbis make a very interesting play on words. They say Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, is related to another word which is Har Sinah, a mountain of hatred. There are two different words, even spelled different with different letters, but they sound very similar. The rabbis are like, they sound similar because they are similar. Mount Sinai, when the Jewish people received the Torah, when we were given our life mission as a nation, as an to be the moral and ethical voice that Abraham had started 1,000 years or so before that point, that we now culminated as a nation to receive the Torah, to become the Am HaNivchar, to become the light upon the Or, L'Goyim, the light of spiritual justice and ethical, moral monotheism for the entire world. That's when anti-Semitism began, and it's not going to go away. We can find every reason and every cause, but in the end, they're just excuses, because it's not going to go away. It's part of who we are. It's not pleasant. And the people who perpetrate it should be held accountable. I'm not giving anyone a free card. But from our perspective, the way we look at it, we should speak out against it. And from my small little pulpit of classes and programs and social media, I do call it out all over the world as much as I can. And I do receive a lot of backlash because of it. But I'm going to keep doing it, because the Jewish people have to understand that it's not going away. It's part of who we are. When you become a moral voice, people are going to hate you, whether you accept your mission or not. Let me give you an analogy to explain exactly what I'm saying. When my kids were younger, we double up all our kids. We don't have that many rooms at home, so we had to double up our kids in the rooms. And two of my daughters shared one room, and it would be pretty typical for me to say to one of my daughters, Racheli, go tidy your room. And she was a very, very good kid. But sometimes a kid will be like, yeah, give me another 5 minutes, Abba. 5 minutes passes. Go tidy your room. Give me another 3 minutes, Abba. Still no room tidying. Go tidy your room. Eventually the other sister, who didn't make the mess, will be like, okay, I'll do it. I will make her way to clean the mess that's not hers, just to stop Imma and Abba driving her crazy. Why is it that on the way to tidy mess that isn't hers, she gets a hit or a little push from her older sister who did actually make the mess? What's that about? Why do kids do that? Why do adults do that? And I think the reason is very much what we're describing today. No one likes to be dealt a blow from a moral, ethical voice. Because when we accept the fact that there is a morality, there is an ethical standard in this world, it makes other people look bad. It shouldn't. It should be a point of inspiration, of light for other people to want to rise up, to live to that standard. I mean, look at the IDF today. Israel Defense Forces, not attack forces, who defend their people, who are so careful. I don't care what you hear in the media. It's a lie. They are so careful not to hurt any people. The amount of civilian casualties compared to any other war attack is minuscule. And hate it, believe me, they don't want it. I've spoken to many people. There is a draft of ethical moral code that no army in world history has ever lived by. And yet they hate us and complain about the army and our tactics. Open any newspaper today. Even Jewish-owned ones, unfortunately. And you'll see them complain about the IDF. Why? Because when you have an army, like the Jewish army in Israel today, or any other army the Jewish people have had to muster together throughout Jewish history, and we always rise up to a higher moral and ethical standard, even in warfare, where other nations are wiping out cities or countries. And we're careful to pinpoint exactly where the enemy is in order not to hurt non-combatants, and yet they still hate us because that moral code reflects upon them. That's the problem, my friends. That's the challenge that other nations have to live up to. Let me quote Sigmund Freud, a completely secularized, as far as I know, atheist Jew, but a Jew nonetheless, who wrote the following very smart words. Jews are hated not so much because they killed Jesus, but because they produced him. I'm going to think about that. The Jewish people are hated not because they killed Jesus, it's because they produced him. We are the people who allow such moral, ethical teachings to come out into the world. And that's really what the Torah is. The Torah and Jewish existence, whether we buy into it or not, which I hope we do, but even if you don't, they're still going to hate you. Our mere presence in this world, God created us as a nation, as a moral voice, as the sole consciousness. Not that we are special, we're just the ones who are given it, just like the teacher isn't more special than the students. They're just given a particular function. And many times when people don't like to hear, they shoot the messenger. We, the Jewish people, are the ultimate messengers of world history. So what's the solution? I hear you asking. So once again, pretty ambitious for me to sit here and give a solution to anti-Semitism when it's been around for 3,500 years or so, and yet it's still here. But I want to say one thing, and I want to leave you with this idea. If anti-Semitism is the problem, I believe the solution to it is going to come through Semitism. We fight anti-Semitism, we've already seen, not by assimilating and not by removing all sides. It doesn't make sense. If my daughter came home and said she's being bullied because she's got blue eyes, you don't go and find contact lenses that are brown and put them in their eye. That would just be absurd. No normal person would do that. They would explain to the child that that's what makes you special. That's what makes you different. This is a unique thing that you have. That's your uniqueness. That's going to help you achieve whatever you need to achieve in this world. You wouldn't tell your child who's got blue eyes or green eyes or black eyes to change the color of their eyes in order to stop being bullied for having them. That would be terrible. So too, the answer to anti-Semitism isn't just to remove all vestiges of Judaism that exist in your life. Because first of all, that's not the way to deal with hatred. And second of all, it doesn't work. Because we've seen too many times in world history where people are hated for being Jewish, assimilated, and are still hated more than before. Just read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which I highly recommend you do read. Right? The people who really suffered the most in the Holocaust, he said, were those people who really didn't see themselves as Jewish, who had negated any Judaism in their lives whatsoever, any sense of meaning through their Judaism. And when they were persecuted, they were like, doesn't make sense. And yet the ones who felt part of it said, yeah, it's horrible. I hate it. I wish it would go away. But at least it makes sense. And so what I say is know what it is to be a Jew. Understand who we are, where we've come from, what being Jewish means, what the Torah is, what our mandate, our vision, our moral calling in the world is really all about. And when you have that, somehow you build up a resilience. You build up a backbone, an understanding, an appreciation that even the worst anti-Semites can never break, no matter how bad it gets. And those are the people, my friends, who hold the Jewish people to our highest standard throughout our history. Those are the people who understand who we are, who appreciate that the answer to anti-Semitism comes from true Semitism. Know who you are, understand your people, and fight back with knowledge and understanding, not from hiding and denial. Okay, this class was a little bit longer than usual. Thank you all for joining. Hope you enjoyed. And do share this class. I'll be back tomorrow at 12 o'clock on this channel or these channels for more classes. Thank you so much.